My husband was gravely ill. I sold all three of our houses to save his life. The day of his successful surgery, he held his first love's hand and said, "The assets are all transferred." I wiped my tears, smiled, then turned and pushed open the door to the attending physician's office. My name is Emily, 35 years old, born and raised in New York City. That year, I thought my life had hit rock bottom, only to be pulled up and then realize the most terrifying thing isn't illness, but a person's heart turning black and white the moment you've given your all. My husband's name is Michael. We had been married for 7 years. We have a son named Leo, who just turned 5. Before the storm hit, anyone looking at our family would say we were the kind of family people joked about, just comfortable enough to live peacefully. Not excessively wealthy, but not struggling. We had built a small construction supply company on the outskirts of the city together. I handled the books, internal and external affairs, while Michael managed the market, clients, and construction sites. For years, we worked equally hard, staying up late and waking up early together, saving every dollar we made. I used to believe that the man who walked with me through the hard times would be the one who best understood the value of love and commitment. Until that fateful night. It was almost 2 a.m. I was asleep when I heard a loud thud from the bathroom. I shot up in a panic and ran in to find Michael collapsed on the tile floor, one hand clutching his chest, his face as pale as a sheet, sweat pouring off him like he'd been in a sauna. He was gasping for air, his lips turning blue, his eyes wide with a look of both agony and terror. I was shaking so much I dropped my phone while calling 911. That night, I barely remember the journey from our home to Mount Sinai Hospital. I only recall the piercing wail of the ambulance siren. I remember the frantic pounding of my own heart, feeling like it would burst from my chest, and Michael's hand, so cold that I had to use both of my hands to warm it, yet it remained frigid. After a series of tests, a doctor called me aside. The hallway light was cold and white, the smell of antiseptic sharp in my nose. The senior resident on duty looked at me for a long moment before speaking, his voice very slow. "The family needs to prepare themselves. Your husband has severe heart failure on top of an acute myocardial infarction. The prognosis is very poor. Without immediate intervention, the mortality risk is extremely high." I stood there, frozen. My ears were ringing. I only vaguely heard the words "extremely high" before my legs went weak. My voice cracked as I asked, "Doctor, is there any way to save him?" He looked at me and answered curtly, "Yes, but the costs will be enormous. The intervention, medication, recovery, the subsequent monitoring process will not be a small sum. The family needs to prepare financially, and soon." I remember nodding repeatedly like a machine. At that moment, money was no longer a concept. My mind had only one thought: I have to save him. Michael's mother took a bus up from upstate New York the very next morning. My sister-in-law, Linda, was also at the hospital early. They both sat outside the intensive care unit, their eyes red and swollen. My mother-in-law gripped my hand tightly, her own trembling violently. "Emily, if anything happens to Michael, I don't think I can go on." I hugged her, though I was on the verge of collapsing myself. But strangely, the more desperate the situation, the calmer I became. I started to calculate. We had 3 major assets. The house we lived in Brooklyn, a small condo I had bought before we were married as a future nest egg for our son, and a rental apartment in Queens, which was our safest investment. The cash in the company was low. Much of the capital was tied up in inventory, outstanding debts, and unfinished contracts. If I wanted money fast, the only way was to sell our properties. It didn't take me long to decide. That afternoon, I made call after call to real estate agents I knew. I accepted offers below market value, as long as I could get the cash quickly. An acquaintance was stunned when he heard, asking, "Have you thought this through? Selling in a rush like this, you'll take a huge loss." I replied swiftly, "A loss is fine. Saving a life comes first." My words were firm, but after hanging up, I had to lock myself in a bathroom to cry, not because I regretted the money, but because of the feeling of having to personally trade the home I had painstakingly built over the years, every brick, every kitchen corner, every cabinet, every bed, for a chance at life, for the man I loved most. Every time I signed a document, my hand trembled. Every time I saw the wire transfer confirmation, my chest felt like it was being squeezed. But I never once hesitated. Friends used to say I was the type of woman who loved too deeply. I didn't deny it. With Michael, I was so devoted that I truly believed if one day only one of us could continue on, I would choose him. Because we had started together with nothing. Fresh out of college, he was a construction engineer, both stubborn and ambitious, while I was an accountant with a meager salary. We ate cheap takeout, rented a tiny apartment, and rode an old scooter, counting every $100 bill. When he failed on his first major project, I was the one who stayed up all night with him, recalculating every number. When I gave birth to Leo, he stood by my hospital bed holding our son, his eyes red as he promised me, "No matter how hard it gets, I will never let you and our son suffer." I had believed that promise for 7 years. So this time, when the doctor said we had to pour money in to save his life, I never once considered giving up. The days that followed were a frantic whirlwind of the hospital. Phone calls, sales contracts, and banks. I spent my days running around with paperwork and my nights sitting outside the ICU. I would snatch moments of sleep on a plastic chair and wake up to ask the nurses if he was any better. I was so exhausted, I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, my skin was sallow, my lips were cracked and dry. But whenever a doctor said his condition was temporarily stable, I felt I could push through for one more day. Finally, after a long battle between life and death, the surgery was scheduled. I stood outside the operating room for nearly 10 hours that day. My mother-in-law was too exhausted and had to lean against the wall. Linda paced back and forth, clutching a rosary. I stood perfectly still, my eyes fixed on the closed door, my palms clammy and cold. When the surgeon emerged, removed his mask, and said, "The surgery was a success," my legs gave out from under me. I didn't cry out loud. Tears just streamed down my face, hot and stinging. At that moment, I truly believed I had beaten fate. I had sold almost everything to save my husband. He had survived. Our family could start over. I had no idea that from that very moment, the real tragedy was just beginning. 3 days after the surgery, Michael was moved from the intensive care unit to a special treatment ward. The doctor emphasized that this was just the first step. A long road of monitoring, medication, rehabilitation, and follow-up appointments lay ahead. But for me, just seeing him open his eyes, just hearing him speak, made every hardship worthwhile. That morning, when the doctor told me Michael was awake, I nearly ran down the hospital corridor. My heart pounded so hard I could hear every beat. I pushed the door open and saw him lying on the bed, gaunt and pale, his skin ashen, his lips dry and cracked, but his eyes were open. I froze for a few seconds, then tears welled up. I approached his bed gently, as if the slightest rough touch might make this man, just pulled back from the brink of death, disappear. "Michael," I whispered. He looked at me, his gaze deep and tired, as if he had so much to say but lacked the strength. I took his fingertips in my hand, my voice trembling. "You're awake. You scared me to death." He moved his lips, and it took a few seconds for him to form words. "You've been through so much." Just those few words were enough to make all my pent-up emotions burst forth. I bowed my head, laughing and crying at the same time. My mother-in-law, standing beside me, turned away to wipe her tears. Linda was so choked with emotion her eyes turned red. In the afternoon, Michael was a bit stronger. I carefully wiped his face with a warm cloth and helped him take small sips of water. All day, a single thought occupied my mind. My family had finally overcome its greatest trial. That was, until the door to the hospital room creaked open. I thought it was a nurse, so I didn't turn around immediately. It was only when a faint floral scent filled the air that my hand paused. On instinct, I turned my head. A woman stood at the door. She wore a cream-colored dress. Her hair was softly curled, her makeup impeccable, and she held a large bouquet of white lilies. I could never forget that face, even after so many years. It was Jessica, Michael's ex-girlfriend, the woman who had left him back when they were both struggling to marry a wealthier man. I stood there, stunned. Jessica, on the other hand, was completely at ease. She walked in, as if she had every right to be there. Her eyes flickered over me for a brief moment before settling on the hospital bed. "I heard you were sick. I was so worried, so I came to see you." Her voice was soft, delicate, and very clever. Before I could even react, she had placed the bouquet on the bedside table and leaned down to take Michael's hand. The gesture was so natural that a chill ran down my spine. Michael didn't pull his hand away. He looked at Jessica, his expression different from when he looked at me. It wasn't gratitude, nor was it weakness. It was a kind of gentle softening, very subtle, very strange. "How did you know I was here?" an old classmate told me. Jessica's eyes quickly reddened. "You scared me so much." I heard every word, but my ears were ringing. The person who had just sold nearly her entire family's assets to save him was me. The person who had sat outside the ICU for 3 days and nights was me. The person who had run around, scraping together every dollar, signing away our homes with a trembling hand, was me. But now, the one standing by his bed, holding his hand, speaking in a tone so intimate it was as if they had never been apart, was her. My mother-in-law's frown was obvious. Linda gently tugged at my sleeve, a silent reminder to keep calm. I squeezed the paper cup in my hand so tightly it crumpled. Only then did Jessica turn to me with a faint smile. "Emily, you've worked so hard. I heard you've been managing everything on your own." "It's true. Without you, I don't know what Michael would have done." The words seemed kind, but to my ears, they were like a needle prick. I replied, my voice dry. "He's my husband. Whatever I do is what I should do." Jessica maintained her smile. "Yes, I know. I just mean you're truly amazing." The atmosphere in the room immediately became suffocating. Michael closed his eyes, as if tired, as if avoiding the situation. Jessica sat down in the chair I had just been sitting in. She recounted a few old stories from their college days, mentioning memories I had never heard Michael talk about. What chilled me to the bone wasn't the content of her stories, but the way Michael listened. He didn't say much, but the corners of his mouth would occasionally twitch, as if he were reminiscing about some soft, distant memory. I sat beside them, feeling like the third wheel. After a while, Jessica stood up. "You should get some rest. I'll come visit again." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Michael gave a very slight nod. I saw it clearly. After she left, the room fell silent. The white lilies on the bedside table released a cloying, overwhelming fragrance. I walked over to pick up the glass of water I had prepared for Michael earlier, and suddenly my hand felt as heavy as lead. My mother-in-law sighed. Linda looked at me, her voice low. "Don't overthink it. He just woke up. His mind isn't clear yet." I forced a smile, but I knew it was painfully strained. That evening, I sat alone in the hospital corridor for a long time. I told myself not to be suspicious, not to jump to conclusions, not to let an old flame shatter the composure I had fought so hard to maintain. But some things you only need to see once to understand. The way Michael didn't pull his hand away, the way he looked at Jessica, the way she walked into his hospital room as if she had belonged there for a long time. I sat silently, watching my own long shadow on the cold tiled floor, a very bad feeling stirring in my heart for the first time. I had a sense that my battle wasn't over. Perhaps it had only just begun. After Jessica's visit to the hospital room, I couldn't get a full night's sleep anymore. During the day, I was still the devoted wife I had always been, waking up early to buy him oatmeal, changing his towels, consulting with the doctors, noting down his medication schedule, and making calls to sort out the remaining company affairs. But at night, as soon as I closed my eyes, I would see her hand on Michael's, see his gaze soften in a way he hadn't looked at me for a very long time. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe he was just recovering from a major illness, his spirit still weak. Maybe it was just an old acquaintance visiting, nothing more. Maybe I was just too tired, too sensitive, and overthinking things. But in this life, the most frightening thing isn't a sharp, painful slap, but the small, silent, steady cuts that are just enough to wake a woman from all her illusions. Jessica came twice more that week. The first time, she brought a box of expensive organic broths, saying they were good for someone who had just had surgery. The second time, she brought brochures for a high-end rehabilitation center in Florida, her voice filled with concern. "I've checked it out thoroughly. The facilities here are excellent, the doctors provide close supervision, and the environment is peaceful. It would be perfect for Michael to recuperate there for a while. I was standing beside them, peeling an apple, and my hand froze mid-motion. Before I could say anything, Michael quietly replied, let me take a look. Just those few words sent a sharp pain through my heart, like a needle prick. I sold our houses to pay for his surgery. I stayed up all night watching over him through the critical period. I ran myself ragged between the hospital, the bank, and the home buyers until my limbs ached. And her? She just had to show up, looking fresh and fragrant, offer a few words of concern, and she could insert herself into important post-op decisions as if she had every right to. That afternoon, my mother-in-law had to go back upstate for a day. Linda's child was sick. It was just me and Michael in the hospital room. I was sitting in the chair by his bed, jotting down the doctor's instructions in a small notebook, when his phone buzzed. Michael was asleep. The screen lit up on the bedside table. The caller ID showed a single letter, J. My heart stopped. I didn't touch the phone. I just stared at that letter until the screen went dark. A few seconds later, the phone lit up again. This time it wasn't a call, but a text message. I still didn't open it, but the mere fact that someone was saved with just a single, special initial was enough for me to understand that person's place in his heart was anything but ordinary. Michael woke up shortly after. The first thing he did was grab his phone. His thumb swiped quickly across the screen, very fast, but not fast enough for me to miss the slight twitch at the corner of his lips. I pretended I hadn't seen anything. That evening, as I was adjusting his pillow, I said very quietly, Jessica came by again today. Michael was silent for a few seconds, then replied, Oh, are you two still in touch? The moment the question left my lips, I felt my throat tighten. Michael didn't look at me. He just stared out the window, his voice flat. Occasionally, we're old friends. Old friends. A phrase uttered so lightly, as if all my anxieties were just me overreacting. I gave a bitter smile but tried to keep my voice normal. Old friends who visit the hospital this often? This time, Michael turned to look at me. His eyes held a trace of fatigue, but beneath it was a clear annoyance. Can you please not overthink things? I just woke up. I really don't want to argue. I was speechless. I was the one arguing? I was the one causing trouble? The woman who walked into my marriage with a bouquet of white lilies and flirtatious glances was her. But the one being told not to make a big deal out of it was me. I didn't say another word. That night, after Michael was asleep, I went into the bathroom, turned the faucet on full blast, and leaned against the sink. The face in the mirror was both strange and pathetic. Haggard, tired, eyes red. A woman who had just sold nearly all her assets to save her husband now had to stand here, learning to swallow her tears, just because her husband didn't see a problem with his ex-girlfriend frequenting his hospital room. I asked myself, since when did I become so submissive? In the following days, I started paying more attention. Michael was on his phone more often. Sometimes, as I walked into the room, he would quickly place his phone face down on the blanket. There were calls he wouldn't answer in front of me. Once, he even said, I'm tired. Can you go down to the cafeteria and get me a warm glass of milk? I went, but on my way back, through the small glass window on the hospital room door, I saw him on the phone. His expression was soft, the corners of his lips slightly curved up. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but just from his demeanor, I knew that wasn't how a man talks to a business partner or a casual friend. I didn't push the door open right away. I stood silently in the hallway, feeling as if someone were slowly crushing my heart. It took a long time before I could compose myself, pick up the glass of milk, and walk in as if I had seen nothing. Michael looked up. You're back? I placed the milk on the table. Yes. He watched me for a moment, as if trying to gauge if I had heard anything, but I just bowed my head to open the lid of the milk, my voice light as air. Drink it while it's still warm. In that very moment, I knew I couldn't lie to myself any longer. A woman can endure hardship, she can endure loss, she can be patient for her husband, her child, her family, but a wife's instinct is never wrong when her husband has made space in his heart for another woman. And what chilled me even more was the vague realization that this space hadn't just appeared, It had been there for a while. It was just that today, I was in enough pain to finally see it clearly. Michael was discharged after nearly 3 weeks in the hospital. Before he left, the doctor repeatedly warned us that this stage was absolutely critical. Medication had to be taken on time, in the correct dosage. The diet had to be strict. His mental state needed to be stable, and follow-up appointments were mandatory. I sat and filled several pages of a notebook with notes, line by line, as if by being extra careful, I could truly guide our family through the storm. But the closer his discharge day came, the heavier a weight settled in my heart. Michael no longer hid the fact that Jessica was contacting him. Though he still acted normal in front of me, small details were enough to make me choke. Once, I brought his medicine in, and he quickly turned off his phone screen. Another time, I heard a constant stream of text message notifications late at night. He just turned his back to me and replied quickly. He even told me once, in a tone so gentle it broke my heart, "Why don't you go home and rest for a night? Staying here all the time must be exhausting." In the past, hearing my husband show concern would have warmed my heart. Now, it just made me feel cold. I didn't go home. I lied and said I was used to it. The truth was, I was afraid that the moment I turned my back, someone else would take my seat. When we got home, Michael suggested he sleep in the office, citing the need for peace and quiet to rest. It would also be convenient, he said, for handling some company matters via phone and computer. The reason sounded perfectly logical. My mother-in-law heard it and nodded. Yes, let him have his quiet. His heart has just stabilized. Rest is the most important thing. I didn't object. I knew that once that door closed, it wouldn't just separate 2 rooms, but 2 people. Still, I nodded. As you wish. I'll get it ready for you. I personally made the bed in the office, set up a small table for his medicine, water, pill organizer, and blood pressure monitor. I was so thorough, it was almost laughable. My husband was hiding things behind my back, and here I was, still meticulously caring for a man who had just returned from the brink of death. The first night sleeping alone, I tossed and turned until almost dawn. Around 2 a.m., I got up for a glass of water. The light in the office was still on, the door slightly ajar. I stopped, very quietly. Inside, Michael was on the phone. His voice was low, but I could still catch a few fragmented phrases. I know. Don't be impatient. Just wait a few more days. Now's not the time. I stood frozen in the dark hallway, a numbness spreading through me. I didn't need to see the screen to know who was on the other end of the line. The next morning, while Michael was in the shower, he left his phone on the table. I sat on the edge of the bed, my palms cold and clammy. I had been wrestling with this for so long, for so many nights. I always told myself that if I still respected this marriage, I couldn't do it. But today, I understood one thing clearly. Michael was not the one respecting the boundaries anymore. I picked up the phone. The passcode was Leo's birthday. I got it on the first try. My heart was pounding so hard my vision blurred. The messages with Jessica weren't very long, but they were enough to leave one speechless. Most were inquiries about his health. But it was the casualness of it all that scared me. There was no awkwardness, no distance, no sense that these were 2 people who had broken up and were now coincidentally back in touch. Everything was frighteningly natural. I scrolled down. There was a bank transfer from over a month ago, right when the company was facing its toughest time. The amount was $20,000. The recipient, Jessica. My hands started to shake. $20,000. That was when I was spinning like a top, trying to find money for materials for a new project. That was when I thought we were both fighting to get through the hard times together. I continued to the Notes app. In the drafts, there was an untitled file. I tapped on it. It was a draft of a divorce settlement. I had to read it 3 times to fully grasp its contents. The division of assets was almost completely unfavorable to me. Custody of our son leaned towards Michael, with the reasoning that my mental state was unstable due to prolonged financial pressure. The section on real estate clearly listed which properties had been sold. What remained was to be prioritized for the long-term treatment of the seriously ill husband. I sat there, stunned. It wasn't suspicion anymore, not a gut feeling. It was all there in black and white. Michael had not only betrayed me, He had planned to kick me out of his life cleanly, with preparation, with a strategy, with very clear steps. I heard the water in the bathroom stop. Panicked, I quickly took screenshots of everything, sent them to a secondary email I had created long ago, then cleared the history, closed the app, and put the phone back where it was. When Michael came out, I was sitting there, reorganizing his pill box as if nothing had happened. He looked at me and paused slightly. "You're up early." I looked up and smiled. "Just checking your medication. I don't want to mix up the times." Michael nodded, unsuspecting. And I, for the first time since our wedding day, understood the feeling of a heart dying while the face could remain so calm. That night, after Michael was asleep, I sat alone in the bathroom, staring at the screenshots on my phone. The tears wouldn't come. Pain, when it goes beyond a certain threshold, no longer has a voice. It just turns into a deep, dark coldness. I knew that from this moment on, I was no longer a wife trying to save her marriage. I would have to save myself and my son first. And to do that, I had to be silent. Silent until I had enough evidence. Silent until no one could deny it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I still made oatmeal, still boiled warm water, still portioned out his medication on time, still got Leo up to brush his teeth and eat breakfast as if nothing had happened. I looked in the mirror while tying my hair and saw my face was strangely calm. Only my eyes were different. They were no longer soft, no longer shattered like the days before. They were like a dark, still lake. Even looking into them felt cold. Michael came out of the office, his posture still weak but his complexion much better. He sat down at the dining table, looked at the bowl of hot oatmeal I had just served, and said, "You don't have to make so much. Something simple is fine." I pulled out a chair for him, my voice as gentle as ever. "The doctor said you need enough nutrition. Whatever you can eat, I'll make." Michael nodded, not looking directly at me. I understood that people who are guilty usually fall into two categories. One tries to make up for it. The other increasingly avoids the gaze of the one they betrayed. Michael was the latter. Leo sat beside us, chattering about his day at school. His innocence was heartbreaking. He had no idea that just beyond the office door, his parents' marriage had begun to rot from the inside. After dropping our son off at school, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a small coffee shop by the lake to sit alone. I opened the photos from last night again. The draft of the divorce settlement, the $20,000 transfer, the cold yet intimate text messages. I stared at them for a long time, until my hands stopped shaking. Then I called someone. Olivia, my college roommate, now a lawyer, specializing in marriage and asset disputes in New York. The moment the call connected and she heard my voice, Olivia paused. "Emily, what's wrong?" I was silent for 2 seconds, then said, "I need to see you. Urgently. And absolutely no one can know about this." An hour later, I was sitting across from Olivia in her private office. I told her the story briefly, factually, without crying, without embellishment. I told her about Michael's illness, selling the houses, Jessica's appearance, the phone, the money transfer, the draft of the divorce settlement. Olivia listened, her face growing colder. She sat in silence for a few seconds before asking, "Do you still have the evidence?" "Yes. I took screenshots of everything. It's not strong enough on its own, but it's enough for you to know where you stand." I nodded. Olivia leaned back in her chair and looked straight at me. "Listen to me. From now on, you absolutely cannot let him know. Don't press him, don't question him, don't make a scene. The calmer you are, the more careless he'll be." I gave a bitter smile. "I think I can do that," Olivia sighed. "First, back up all the evidence in at least 2 different places. Second, review all jointly owned assets, debts, company cash flow, property deeds, loan agreements. Third, pay attention to Michael's medication. A man who's planning a divorce right after being saved isn't a decent person." I looked up at her. "You mean?" "I mean, it's better to be safe than sorry. A man who's already thinking of leaving his wife with nothing, you can't trust him to stop there." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I went home feeling much more clear-headed. Not because things were any lighter, but because for the first time, I understood that to survive this, I couldn't afford to be weak anymore. That afternoon, Michael was in his office on the phone for a long time. When I brought a glass of water in, He immediately ended the call. I placed the glass down, my voice steady. "Remember to take your medicine on time." Michael looked at me. "You've been strange lately." I turned back. "Strange how?" "Too calm," I smiled. "Maybe because I'm tired." Michael fell silent. I fell silent. We both knew there was an invisible wall between us. It was just that neither of us had knocked it down yet. That night, waiting for Michael to fall asleep, I opened my old laptop and started digging through all the company files. I used to be the main bookkeeper, but in recent months, busy with our son and household chores, I had let Michael handle many of the larger transactions. The more I looked, the more irregularities I found. There were several cash withdrawals with unclear reasons. There was a consulting contract with a very strange-sounding company. There were vague notes, deliberately written so briefly that an outsider would think they were normal. I took pictures of everything. The more I looked, the more I understood. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to divert assets. As I was sitting there, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Olivia. "Remember one thing. From now on, you are not the betrayed wife anymore. You are the one gathering evidence." I read that sentence over and over for a long time. Outside the window, the New York sky had started to rain without me noticing. The sound of rain pattered softly on the roof, the railings, the window panes. The whole house was dark and cold. In the office, the man I once loved more than myself was sleeping. He didn't know that right now, the woman he thought was cornered was sitting here, piecing together the fragments of the truth. I no longer wanted to ask him why. Once he had drafted a divorce settlement while I was selling our homes to save him, all answers became meaningless. What I needed now was not a confession, but evidence strong enough that when I walked away, I wouldn't be left with nothing. From the day I met with Olivia, I started living like two different people in the same body. One person still went to the grocery store, cooked meals, picked up our son, portioned out her husband's medicine, reminded him of his follow-up appointments, and spoke softly as if there were no cracks in our home. The other person sat coldly in front of a computer screen every night, reviewing every bank statement, every expense, every contract, every signature, as if the slightest mistake would send her and her son tumbling into an abyss. I had to admit, Michael was very careful. If it weren't for the draft of the divorce settlement on his phone, I might still be telling myself that he was just temporarily soft-hearted towards an old flame. But the deeper I delved into the company's cash flow, the clearer it became that this wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a whole preparatory process. There was a loan of over $120,000 dispersed late last year, secured by the company's warehouse. The reason on the paperwork was to supplement working capital, but the money didn't go towards the usual inventory purchases. It ran through a very strange-sounding intermediary company, then was split into multiple transfers to different accounts. Among them was a personal account in the name of Jessica Miller. This time it wasn't $20,000. The total was nearly $40,000. I stared at the numbers on the screen, my hands ice cold. $40,000. That was a sum Michael had never mentioned to me. That was when he was still coming home for dinner, still hugging our son, still lying beside me, saying very normal things like, "I have to meet a client tomorrow," or "Let's remember to take Leo out this weekend," or "Receivables are a bit tight this month." He was lying to me every single day we lived together. I took screenshots of all the statements, carefully saved them to 2 different email accounts, and sent another copy to Olivia. About half an hour later, she called back. "Emily, this is more serious than I thought." I leaned against the wall, my voice very low. "Can I get it back?" "To get it back, you have to prove it's an asset formed during the marriage, or that company funds were improperly diverted. But first, you need more evidence to show that Jessica isn't just a normal recipient of money." I fell silent. Olivia knew immediately what I was thinking. "Do you know her address?" "I know the area. She used to live at Hudson Yards with her ex-husband. She probably doesn't live there anymore." "Don't go looking for her yourself. Let me have someone do it." I gripped the phone tightly. "Olivia, I don't want to make a scene. At least, not yet. Don't worry, I understand." 2 days later, Olivia sent me an address in a luxury apartment complex in Midtown West, along with a few short lines. "Jessica is renting an apartment here, living alone. Finances are unstable. Has credit card debt and a few personal loans. I stared at the message for a long time. So it was true. She didn't come back for some beautiful old love. She came back for the money. That afternoon, Michael told me he had a meeting with an old partner to discuss inventory and might be home late. I was cutting fruit for Leo. Hearing him, I just looked up and asked, "Are you going alone?" Michael paused slightly. "Yeah. Why?" I shook my head. "No reason. Just reminding you to bring your medicine." Michael nodded, avoiding my gaze. I watched his back disappear behind the door, then silently went to my room, got changed, and called a trusted neighbor to watch Leo for an hour, saying I had to pick up some company files. I didn't intend to follow Michael from the start. I just needed to be sure of one thing. From the parking garage of the Midtown West apartment building, I sat in a taxi. I watched the main lobby for nearly 40 minutes before Michael's car pulled up. He got out slowly, his posture still not fully recovered, but his expression was completely different from when he was at home. Not tired, not irritable, not distant. He even looked up to adjust his collar. A few minutes later, Jessica came out of the lobby. She wore a light brown sheath dress, her hair in a low bun, her lips red. Even from a distance, her carefully put-together appearance was clear. She walked quickly towards Michael and very naturally linked her arm through his. Michael didn't push her away. Instead, he leaned down and said something that made her laugh. I sat in the taxi, my hands clutching the purse on my lap. I thought I would be in so much pain I couldn't breathe, like the first time I saw her in the hospital. The feeling this time wasn't pain anymore. It was a coldness, like a wound that had been stabbed in the same place so many times the flesh had gone numb. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't rush over to confront them. I just took out my phone and took a series of photos from a safe distance. The faces weren't perfectly clear, but the figures, the car, the location, and the way she held onto my husband's arm as if it were her rightful place were all clear enough. As the taxi turned around, I realized my hands were shaking violently. That night, Michael came home very late. He smelled of women's perfume mixed with a faint scent of wine. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to go over alphabet flashcards with Leo. When he saw his dad, our son ran out excitedly. "Daddy. Daddy? What did you buy for me?" Michael bent down and ruffled his hair. "I'll make it up to you tomorrow, okay?" Daddy was busy today. Leo pouted for a moment, then ran back to me. I looked up at Michael. "What partner made you so happy?" Michael flinched, very slightly. "What? You just seem lighter today." I smiled, my voice as soft as water. Michael looked at me for a moment, then turned away. "Just closed a small deal." I nodded, not asking any more questions. But that night, after Michael was asleep, I opened my phone and looked at the pictures from Midtown West again. In one, Jessica's hand was resting on his elbow. In another, Michael was leaning slightly towards her, as if to hear better. That kind of proximity is never for two people who only see each other as old friends. I sat in the darkness for a long time, then sent all the photos to Olivia. The accompanying message was just one sentence. "I don't care when they started loving each other anymore. I just need to know how to make them give back what they took from my son and me." After the evening, I followed Michael to the apartment complex in Midtown West. I had no illusions left. If before I thought I needed more time to confirm, now everything was painfully clear. The man I had saved from the operating table with the money from selling our homes was step by step preparing an exit for himself, one where there was no room for my son and me. But the clearer it became, the more I forced myself to remain calm. Because I understood very well that if I lost my temper first, I would be the first to lose. In the following days, I changed my approach to observation. I no longer just paid attention to Michael's phone or his schedule. I started to notice his attitude towards money. Whenever I mentioned the remaining money from the sale of the rental apartment, his eyes would change very quickly, like a blade flashing before being immediately hidden away. One evening at dinner, Michael asked very casually, "Has the buyer for the Queen's apartment closed the deal yet?" I was putting fish on Leo's plate, pretending not to notice. "Not yet. They're trying to negotiate the price down further." Michael was silent for a few seconds, then said, "If the price is decent, just sell it. I still have long-term treatment ahead. Leaving it there doesn't solve anything. I looked up at him. That was the last apartment I was trying to hold on to. If I sold it, my son and I would have almost nothing left as a safety net. I smiled bitterly to myself, but my face remained light. I know. Let me think about it. Michael didn't say anything more. But from that day on, he brought up money more often. Sometimes he would ask about the progress of the transfer documents. Other times he would mention that the remaining funds had to be prioritized for medication and rehabilitation. And sometimes he would vaguely talk about how, once his health improved, he would reconsider the company, the house. On the surface, it all sounded reasonable, but I knew he was getting anxious. He was anxious because he wanted the money in his hands as soon as possible. That night, around 1 a.m., I was woken by the sound of a phone ringing. It wasn't mine, it was Michael's, coming from the office. I sat bolt upright in the darkness, my heart pounding. The house was silent. The phone only rang twice before stopping. A few seconds later, the office door opened very quietly. I lay still, peeking through the crack of my bedroom door. Michael stepped out into the hallway, walking very lightly, one hand holding his phone, the other steadying himself against the wall. He went out to the balcony at the end of the house before answering the call. I silently slipped out of bed, tiptoeing barefoot to the back of the kitchen, hiding in the dark space near the sliding door. Michael's voice was very low, but the night was so quiet I could still hear fragmented pieces. I know you need the money, but I can't transfer it right now. Don't push me at this time. I stood there, frozen. On the other end was a woman's voice, the words indistinct, but I recognized the tone. It was Jessica. Michael continued, his voice sharper this time. I told you, the paperwork isn't done. Once that apartment is sold, there will be cash. Just be patient. I gripped the edge of the doorframe until my knuckles ached. So it wasn't just an affair. Jessica was pressuring him for money. And Michael was waiting for me to sell our last apartment, to give the money to her. Before I could even process the chill running down my spine, the person on the other end seemed to say something very harsh. Michael's voice dropped significantly. I told you, don't talk about these things over the phone. Are you crazy? I said I would handle it, but I have to let her sell it herself. Let her offer it up, so it's clean. Every word was like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. Let her sell it herself, let her offer it up, so it's clean. I hadn't misheard. I wasn't imagining things. He was planning to let me personally gather our remaining assets and present them to him. Michael stayed on the balcony for a few more minutes. I didn't dare move an inch. By the time he came back inside, I had managed to slip back into bed, pull the covers up, and lie still as if I were asleep. The bedroom door didn't open. He went straight back to his office. But I couldn't close my eyes that night. I stared at the ceiling until morning, a single sentence repeating in my mind. Let her sell it herself, let her offer it up, so it's clean. I had never felt so humiliated. I used to think betrayal was the worst pain. No, the worst pain is when the person you love not only betrays you but also sees you as a stupid pawn, someone who, with a little coaxing, will hand over everything they have. The next morning, I still woke up early and cooked as usual. Michael sat down at the table, his face a little tired from the late night but still trying to maintain a normal appearance. I placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of him. Did you not sleep well last night? Michael flinched very slightly. Yeah. My heart was racing a bit, so I was up for a while. I nodded. Then you should get some more rest today. Don't be on your phone so much. Michael looked at me suspiciously. You're very perceptive lately, I smiled. Because I'm afraid of losing you. Leo, sitting beside us, innocently asked, Mommy, when are we moving? I turned to my son, my hand frozen in midair. Who told you that? Daddy said, if we sell the house, we'll live somewhere else. I slowly looked up at Michael. Our eyes met across the dining table for just a second, but it was enough for me to understand that he had already started planting the idea in our son's head. I leaned down to give Leo more oatmeal, my voice still gentle. That's for Mommy to decide. Then I stood up to get some water from the kitchen. The moment my back was turned, my face became a cold mask. That evening, I called Olivia. This time, I didn't ramble. I spoke very clearly about the late-night phone call, about Michael's impatience with the last apartment, about how he had started feeding our son ideas about moving. Olivia was silent for a few seconds after I finished, then said, "Emily, you have to make a move first. You can't let the money get into his hands." I sat in the darkness, my voice hoarse. "I know. And from now on, everything you say to him must have a purpose." I gripped the phone tightly. Okay. That night, I opened the evidence folder again and created a new file. The file name was, "If I stay silent, my son and I will lose everything." I knew very well that from now on, the fight was no longer about whether Michael loved Jessica. It was about who would make the first move. The next morning, I brought up the Queen's apartment myself. Michael was taking his medicine. When he heard me, he looked up quickly, a flash of anticipation in his eyes that he couldn't hide. I sat down across from him, my voice calm. "I called the real estate agent again yesterday." Michael put his glass of water down. "What did they say?" "There's a serious buyer, but they're lowballing us. If we sell now, we'll take a big hit." Michael was silent for 2 seconds, then said, "A small loss is better than leaving it there. The priority now is money for treatment." I looked straight at him. There was a time when, if he had said something like that, I would have agreed immediately without a second thought. The person worrying about money for his treatment wasn't him. The person being lowballed, being squeezed for every last penny, also wasn't him. Yet he still said it so casually. I leaned down to adjust his pillbox, my voice very slow. "I thought so too. But I've thought it through. If we sell in a rush now, the amount we get back won't be much. And you still have a long schedule of follow-up appointments. If we need money urgently later, we'll have nothing left." Michael looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "So you're saying you're not selling?" I looked up and smiled very faintly. "I'm saying we're not selling right now. Let's wait a while for a better price, or at least until you're more stable. Once the company is less of a mess, we can reconsider." Just that one sentence was enough to change his expression. It wasn't obvious, just a tightening of his lips, a loss of softness in his eyes. But I could see he wasn't happy. And that unhappiness confirmed all my suspicions were correct. Michael didn't respond right away. He picked up his phone and scrolled through it a few times, as if to hide his emotions, before finally replying, "All right, if you've thought it through." It sounded casual, but I knew he was starting to get anxious. He spent the rest of the day holed up in his office, his phone buzzing constantly. Once, I brought him some water and saw him quickly turn off his screen. Another time, I heard him pacing back and forth in the room, his footsteps heavy and rushed. At lunch, he barely ate. Leo innocently asked, "Daddy, when are we moving?" Before Michael could answer, I put more rice on our son's plate, my voice natural. "We're not moving, sweetheart. We're staying right here." Leo nodded and continued eating. But Michael stared at me for a long time, as if trying to read what was in my head. That evening, Olivia sent me a list of documents I needed to quietly gather. The deed to the house, the apartment sales contracts, bank statements, loan paperwork, business registration, internal accounting software access, Leo's birth certificate, Michael's most recent medical records. At the end of the message, she emphasized one sentence. "If you don't want to walk away with nothing, you have to be prepared for anything." I read it and sat in silence for a long time. This was the house I thought I would grow old in with Michael. The wooden cabinet in the living room was something we had saved up for after the company's first profitable year. This dining table was one I had chosen myself because I wanted Leo to grow up with a warm place for the family to gather. Even the cream-colored curtains on the window were something I had put up last Christmas because Michael had once said they brightened up the house. I had once loved this home so much that I thought I could sacrifice anything as long as I could keep it intact. But now I understood. A home where only one person is trying to hold it together, while the other is secretly setting fires from within, will sooner or later turn to ash. Around 11 p.m., Michael came out of his office and went straight to the balcony. I was in Leo's room, folding laundry, and I could see his back clearly through the crack in the door. His phone was pressed to his ear, his voice very low, but I could still catch a few phrases. "I told you to wait." She changed her mind. "No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. I just can't push her right now." Every word was a cold cut to my ears. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I sat there, my back ramrod straight, my hand gripping the small shirt I was folding so tightly it wrinkled. So it was true. He was reporting back to Jessica about my refusal to sell the apartment. In their minds, I wasn't his wife, nor the person who had saved his life. I was just the final obstacle between them and the remaining money. The next morning, I was completely different. I made a more elaborate breakfast, even reminded Michael to take his medicine before the alarm went off. He seemed surprised by my gentleness. I knew what I was doing. If you want your opponent to reveal a weakness, you have to make them believe you haven't seen anything yet. After breakfast, I handed Michael a stack of papers. This is next month's follow-up schedule and the list of medication refills I ordered. I've calculated it. We have enough to manage for now. Michael glanced through them. Where's the money from? I replied very naturally. I temporarily withdrew a little from Leo's college fund. As for the apartment, let's just leave it for now. I don't want to sell it at a loss. Michael stared at me. For the first time, I saw a clear, undisguised flash of annoyance in his eyes. Just a flash, but it was enough to confirm I had blocked the right path. He gave a bitter smile. You're very calculating now. I smiled back, because I'm afraid our son will have nothing left later. The moment I said it, the air between us seemed to freeze. Michael turned away first, picking up his phone as if he didn't want to continue the conversation. And I stood there, looking at the back of the man who was once my whole world, feeling frighteningly calm. I knew that from this day on, he wouldn't just be anxious anymore. He would start looking for another way, and I had to be one step ahead of him. I'm not the type of person who likes to push things to the brink. If Michael had simply had a change of heart, if he had been honest and apologized, if he had chosen to leave with dignity, perhaps I would have been hurt, I would have been angry, but I might not have turned into someone who calculates every single step like this. But when a man is holding his old flame's hand while simultaneously targeting his wife and child's last remaining asset and secretly preparing his own escape route, the woman who stands still is the foolish one. I started gathering documents. During the day, I lived as before. I picked up Leo, went to the supermarket, instructed the housekeeper, cooked bland meals for Michael, and reminded him to take his medicine on time. But whenever Michael took a nap or closed his office door for too long, I would seize the opportunity to go through the file cabinets, the safe, the desk drawers, every stack of seemingly harmless paper. There were things I had kept but never paid attention to. There were things I had signed without reading carefully. Looking back now, I saw that every word I had once trusted could turn into a knife and stab me in the back. The deed to the Brooklyn house was still in a locked drawer. I had already set aside the transfer documents for the rental apartment. The business registration, tax ID, warehouse mortgage contract, statements from several company accounts, scanned copies of the strange intermediary contracts I had found earlier. I gathered them bit by bit, photographed them, backed them up, and then returned them to their original places as if they had never been touched. What chilled me the most was an internal commitment letter signed by Michael, which stated that the loan of over $120,000 was to be used for inventory turnover. But the actual cash flow didn't follow that path. This meant that if it were exposed, this would no longer be a simple matter of a husband transferring money to his ex. It was beginning to show signs of financial fraud. That evening, I brought all the necessary scanned documents to Olivia. She reviewed them very carefully, taking notes as she went. The further she got, the more serious her expression became. Emily, this has gone much further than I initially thought. I sat up straight. How far? Olivia put the stack of papers down on her desk. If it were just a divorce due to infidelity, you would still have the moral high ground and some advantage in terms of assets. But if Michael really used a company loan for the wrong purpose and then funneled it through an intermediary to Jessica, this is no longer just a matter between a husband and wife. I remained silent. Olivia looked at me, her voice very slow. You have to be prepared. Once this goes to litigation, it won't be pretty. It will be ugly. It will be loud, and there will be times when you feel completely exhausted. I gave a bitter smile. What's uglier than being schemed against by your own husband to be left with nothing? Olivia didn't answer right away. She opened her desk drawer, took out another business card, and pushed it towards me. This man's name is David. He's a private investigator, has done some asset dispute support cases for my firm. He works discreetly. This isn't for you to catch him in the act, but to further confirm the cash flow, meeting schedules, residence, and if possible, the real information about Jessica's financial situation. I looked at the business card but didn't pick it up right away. I never thought I'd have to go this far. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her voice softening. No one ever thinks they'll have to use the law to save themselves in a marriage. But when a person's heart has changed, the only thing you can trust is what's in black and white. I picked up the business card. My fingertips were ice cold. Leaving Olivia's office, the New York sky was drizzling. The small raindrops clung to the car window, blurring the city outside. I sat in the taxi, my mind exhausted and empty. For a moment, I asked myself if I was going too far. Was it really necessary to dig to the very bottom like this? Could I just turn a blind eye to some of it to keep a whole family for Leo? But then I remembered the late-night phone call, remembered the phrase, "Let her sell it herself, let her offer it up, so it's clean." I remembered the draft of the divorce settlement, the transfer of over $40,000 to Jessica, and I knew, the one who destroyed this family was not me. The one who wanted to maintain a pristine exterior while gutting it from the inside was also not me. When I got home, Michael was in the living room, building a puzzle with Leo. If this were before, the scene would have melted my heart. Leo was giggling, and Michael, for a rare moment, was laughing along with him. The warm yellow light in the living room softened his features, making him look just like the man I once loved. The only difference was that now I knew. Some people are very good at playing the role of a good father for a few hours, a gentle husband for a few meals, while secretly planning how to push their wife and child off a cliff. Michael looked up and saw me, his voice normal. "You're home late." I took off my shoes and put my bag on the couch. I stopped by a friend's place to pick up some old accounting files. Michael looked at me for a second, then asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I should review some accounts before we do the quarterly report. Better to be careful." I saw his hand freeze on a puzzle piece. Just for a moment, but it was enough for me to know he understood the sentence exactly as I wanted him to. I wasn't exposing him. I was just giving him a sign that I was looking at things he thought I would never look at. That night, after putting Leo to bed, I saved David's number in my phone under a fake name. Then I sent a single text. I need a discreet background check on some transactions and a personal relationship related to a marital asset dispute. If you take the job, let's meet tomorrow. After sending the message, I placed my phone face down on the table. In the dark room, the air conditioner hummed steadily, and my heart beat slowly but heavily. I knew I had just crossed another threshold. From today, the help I was seeking was no longer from friends, but from the law, from evidence, things cold enough not to betray me. The next morning, I met David at a small coffee shop in a quiet alley, a few miles from my neighborhood. I deliberately chose a place that wasn't too fancy, not too crowded, just quiet enough to talk without being noticed. David arrived on time. He was in his late 40s, trim, dressed simply, and spoke concisely, without beating around the bush. I gave him what I could at that point, the photos of Michael and Jessica in Midtown West, the information about the apartment she was renting, a portion of the cash flow statements, and a very brief summary of my marital situation. David looked through it quickly, then asked, "What's your top priority?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't need to catch an affair. I need usable truth." David nodded. "Specifically, I need to know where Michael and Jessica are meeting, and how often. I need to know if money from the company or from my husband's personal accounts is still flowing to her. I need to know the extent of Jessica's debt. And if possible, I need anything else that proves they're not just romantically involved, but also involved in matters of assets." David was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "I can do that. But you need to understand, what's admissible in court is one thing, and what gives you leverage to negotiate is another. I'll gather evidence for both." I nodded. "How long?" "I'll send you a preliminary report in 3 days." I paid the retainer on the spot. As I signed the electronic receipt, I noticed my hand was no longer shaking. Perhaps when a person is pushed to the absolute limit, pain automatically gives way to clarity. When I got home, I went back to being the same wife as before. Michael was in his office, his laptop open, his phone face down on the desk. I knocked on the door and brought his medicine in. "It's time." Michael looked up, his eyes quickly scanning me. "Okay, just leave it there." I didn't leave right away. I opened the water bottle and placed it right in front of him. "You should drink it now. You might forget later." Michael stared at me for a few seconds, then took the pills and swallowed them. I stood there until he finished before turning to leave. Ever since I overheard the late-night phone call, I didn't dare let his medication out of my sight. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew one thing for sure. If something happened later, I had to be the first one to prove I wasn't negligent. That evening, while Leo was coloring in the living room, Michael suddenly asked, "You've been going out a lot lately, haven't you?" I was cutting an apple. Hearing him, I looked up. "I go out as usual." "Why? You often say you're going to get files, meet friends, do work." I smiled faintly. "The company isn't completely shut down yet. I have to tie up loose ends." Michael nodded, his expression casual. But I knew he was probing, just like me. He was starting to feel that something was different. I didn't avoid it. "Don't worry. I'm not being careless with the money." Hearing the word money, Michael's hand, which was holding the remote, froze. He turned to look at me, his gaze a little deeper. "What do you mean?" I gave a slice of apple to Leo before answering. "I mean, we don't have much left now. I have to be careful with it." Michael didn't say anything. Leo innocently chimed in. "Mommy is the best at saving money." I laughed and ruffled his hair. "That's right. So when you grow up, you have to remember that financial clarity is what keeps a family at peace." I said it to my son, but the person who understood it best was Michael. 3 days later, David sent me the first preliminary report through a secure link. I opened it the moment I locked my bedroom door. The report wasn't long, but every line sent a chill through me. 1. Michael and Jessica had met at least 5 times in the last 2 weeks, not including her visits to the hospital. 2. The frequent locations were the Midtown West apartment, a Japanese restaurant in the Upper West Side, a discreet coffee shop near Central Park, and twice at a resort just outside the city, but only in the afternoon, never overnight. 3. Jessica was currently in nearly $28,000 of debt, including credit card debt, personal loans, and losses from a failed cosmetics store venture. 4. In the last 3 months, besides the over $40,000 I had already discovered, there were 2 smaller transactions from a secondary account of Michael's to a person named HN. After investigation, David suspected HN was just an intermediary account, with the final destination still being Jessica. 5. There were signs that Michael was preparing to transfer a portion of the rights to the company's remaining inventory to a close business associate, most likely to withdraw cash quickly without going through the joint system. I read on, my chest growing heavier with each word. I no longer felt the pain of a wife. I felt the distinct sensation of being slowly drained of blood in my own home. At the end of the report, David added a line. "Jessica is putting strong financial pressure on Michael. It is highly likely they will so make a more drastic move within the next 1 to 2 weeks." I took a screenshot of the entire report and sent it straight to Olivia. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Olivia. "I've seen it." Her voice was curt. "The situation is worse than we thought." I leaned my back against the headboard, my eyes staring blankly out the window. "What do I do next?" Olivia replied immediately. "Secure the remaining assets with paperwork first. At the same time, prepare the divorce petition and a request for an emergency restraining order on the assets if necessary, but don't file yet. We'll wait for one more move." "Why?" "Because I think they're about to expose a bigger step themselves." I closed my eyes. Just then, I heard Michael calling Leo to bed from outside. His voice was gentle, completely normal, as if that man had nothing to do with the bank statements, the secret meetings, the money, and the schemes I had just read about. I opened my eyes and turned off my phone screen. I understood. The biggest wave hadn't hit yet, but it was very, very close. After David's first report, I no longer saw Michael as a husband. I saw him as someone preparing to make a move. I just didn't know what it would be. Olivia was right. When people are cornered by money, their true nature is revealed faster than in love or hate. I began to change very small things in the house that no one would notice on the surface. I reportioned Michael's medication into a daily organizer, taking photos before and after each dose. I recorded his medication schedule in a separate notebook, noting the time, dosage, and his health condition. Every time I gave him his medicine, I stood and watched until he swallowed it. I personally replaced the glasses of water in his office. I cooked his special meals myself, or at least watched the housekeeper prepare them. It wasn't because I was afraid of harming him, but because I was afraid that one day he or Jessica would create an incident and point the finger at me. I also had Olivia help me find a set of tiny cameras, the kind that could be hidden in the living room and kitchen without anyone noticing. The person who came to install them was a young technician introduced by Olivia, who claimed he was there to check the internet connection because the Wi-Fi signal had been spotty. Michael was out for a follow-up appointment alone that day, and Leo was at school, so everything went so smoothly no one knew. One camera was neatly tucked into the digital clock in the living room, another inside a decorative box near the kitchen counter. I never intended to turn my home into a surveillance zone, but at this point, I understood that if I didn't secure my own evidence, I would have nothing left to save myself with. The next 3 days passed with a strange quietness. Michael went out less, but his phone was almost never out of his hand. Sometimes he would sit for hours in his office, the door slightly ajar, his eyes glued to the screen, his face as tense as a drawn bowstring. I knew David was right. They were preparing their next move. On Thursday afternoon, just after I had picked Leo up from school, I received a text from David. Female subject visited a pharmacy twice in 3 days. Purchased diuretics, cardiovascular support medication, and some electrolytes. Purchases were small and scattered, to avoid suspicion. Advise caution. I read the message, my fingertips going numb. Diuretics. Electrolytes. For someone who just had a heart transplant, using the wrong medication, the wrong dosage, or mixing it with something unsuitable could have devastating consequences. I immediately took a screenshot and sent it to Olivia. Less than 10 minutes later, Olivia called, "Emily, from now on, you absolutely cannot let Michael get his own medicine. I'm already doing that. It's not enough. If you can, you need to check the number of pills in the blister packs. And remember, be discreet. Don't let him know you're on guard." I replied quietly, "Okay." That evening, while Michael was in the shower, I opened the medicine drawer in his office. At first glance, everything looked normal. The anti-rejection medication packs had the correct number of pills, according to my count. The cardiovascular support pills also looked fine. But in the very back corner of the drawer, there was a small, unlabeled vial containing a few off-white pills, similar in shape to the diuretic he was currently taking. My heart tightened. I picked up the vial and held it under the light. No label, no prescription, no name. I immediately took a photo and placed it back exactly where I found it. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Leo, listening to the steady hum of the air conditioner in the living room, my heart as cold as if I were sitting in a deep, dark well. I didn't know what was in that vial, nor did I know if Michael had taken any. But its appearance in his private drawer, right at the time David reported Jessica was secretly buying medication, was enough to set off every alarm bell in my head. The next morning, I tried to keep everything as normal as possible. I portioned out his medicine, gave him water, watched him swallow the pills, and then turned away. He remained as calm as if nothing had happened. The only difference was that throughout breakfast, I felt him looking at me more, as if he too were trying to gauge how much I knew. Around noon, something happened that made me decide I couldn't wait any longer. Leo was coloring in the living room, and I was cutting fruit in the kitchen. Michael came out of his office and said, "I'm a bit tired. I think I'll lie down for a while." I nodded. About 15 minutes later, I heard a loud thud from the office. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to make my heart stop. I ran in to find Michael slumped at the foot of his chair, one hand clutching his chest, the other propped on the floor. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his face deathly pale. I knelt beside him, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "What's wrong?" Michael gasped for breath. "Medicine. Get my medicine." His eyes darted quickly towards the desk drawer. In that exact moment, I remembered the unlabeled vial. I shot up and pulled the drawer open. Inside was his usual box of medication, and the small vial was still in its place. I didn't touch it. I only grabbed the emergency medication the doctor had prescribed and came back with a glass of water. Michael took it with a trembling hand. I looked straight into his eyes. "Take this first." He swallowed it, still gasping for air. Outside, a terrified Leo stood at the door, his eyes red. I pulled my son into a hug, but my eyes never left Michael. In my mind, only one thought remained. The trap had likely just been sprung. And this time, it wasn't on paper or on a phone. It was right here, in my house. While hugging Leo, I kept a close watch on Michael. After swallowing the emergency pill, he leaned back against the chair, his breathing ragged, his forehead covered in sweat. In the past, his pale face would have sent me into a tearful panic, but now, amidst the fear, there was a distinct layer of coldness, because I no longer knew if the man before me was a victim or a link in the trap that had just been set in our own home. "Leo, go to your room and sit quietly for Mommy." My son was on the verge of tears, his eyes red. "I'm scared for Daddy." I bent down and hugged him, trying to keep my voice as gentle as possible. "Daddy's just tired. Go inside, close the door halfway, and wait for me to call you, okay?" Leo nodded, tears streaming down his face, and ran to his room. I turned back to Michael. He was still clutching his chest, his eyes squeezed shut. I took the blood pressure monitor and clipped it onto his arm. My fingers trembled slightly, but my mind was strangely clear. The numbers weren't good. Rapid heart rate, low blood pressure. I asked, "Do you feel anything else?" Michael answered in broken phrases. "Dizzy. Hearts. Racing." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and called 911, clearly stating our address, the patient's condition, his history of a heart transplant, and his current symptoms. While waiting, I immediately texted my mother-in-law and Linda. The last message I sent was to Olivia. "Michael just had a sudden episode. There's an unlabeled vial of pills in his drawer. I'm keeping it." After sending the message, I pulled open the desk drawer, took the small vial, put it in a Ziploc bag, and tucked it into my purse. I also took photos of the drawer, the vial's location, his regular medication, the glass of water on the table, and the clock showing the current time. Everything happened very quickly, so fast that I felt like a stranger to myself. Michael opened his eyes and looked at me. There was something very strange in their depths, a mix of panic and scrutiny. "What are you doing?" I replied calmly, calling 911. "And don't worry, I'll keep everything that needs to be kept." He stared at me for a few seconds, then turned his face away. 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics brought a stretcher into the house. I cooperated swiftly, explaining his medical condition, the time he took his medication this morning, and his symptoms when the episode started. One of the paramedics asked, "Did he take any medication that wasn't prescribed, ma'am?" I looked him straight in the eye. I can't confirm that at this moment, but there was a strange, unlabeled vial of pills in his office. "I have it with me." The paramedic paused for a beat, then nodded. Michael was moved onto the ambulance. Before the doors closed, he called my name, his voice hoarse. "Emily." I stepped closer. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a turmoil I had never seen before. "Don't make a big deal out of this." I stood still for a few seconds, then asked, "A big deal out of what, Michael?" He pressed his lips together, unable to answer. I gently pulled the blanket on the stretcher up for him, my voice as flat as still water. "I'm just trying to save you, like I always have." The ambulance siren wailed as it drove away. I locked the house, asked my neighbor to watch Leo for a little longer, and then took a taxi to the hospital, following behind. The entire way, my hand gripped my purse, where the unlabeled vial was. It was small, but I knew it could very well be the thing that decided a great many things later on. At the emergency room, Michael was taken straight to a special monitoring area. The admitting doctor took his history, performed an EKG, drew blood, and asked me for a detailed timeline. I answered concisely, without an extra word, without a single tear. It was only when the doctor asked, "You are the patient's wife?" that I paused for half a beat before nodding. Just then, my mother-in-law and Linda rushed in, looking frantic. The moment my mother-in-law saw me, she grabbed my arm. "Oh my God, how did this happen?" I helped her sit down, my voice tired but clear. "The doctors are checking him now." I brought all his records and medication lists. Linda looked at my face, then at the purse in my hand. "Are you hiding something from me?" I was silent for a few seconds. "I can't tell you everything right now, but something isn't right at home." Linda froze. A little while later, the doctor came out and said briefly that Michael was experiencing cardiac arrhythmia with an unusual electrolyte imbalance. He needed close observation and more specialized tests. When I heard the words, electrolyte imbalance, my heart sank. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. I asked the doctor for a private word. In a corner of the hallway, I took the Ziploc bag out of my purse and lowered my voice. "Doctor, this is a vial of pills I found in my husband's desk drawer. It's unlabeled and not part of his prescription. I request that the hospital formally receive it and have it tested." The doctor looked at me, then at the vial, and his expression immediately changed. He nodded very slowly. "Hand it over to me. The hospital will handle it according to protocol." I let go of the vial, but my heart felt no lighter. Because I knew that once this thing was sent for testing, it would no longer be a matter of suspicion. It would move to another stage, a stage where I would either save myself or be dragged down into the very pit that had been dug for me. I sat in the emergency room hallway for nearly 2 hours. My mother-in-law leaned on Linda's shoulder, taking ragged breaths. Linda paced back and forth, her face ashen, and I, from beginning to end, just sat with my back straight, my hands on my knees, my eyes fixed on the bright white glass doors ahead. To an outsider, I probably looked cold, but only I knew that if I let myself relax for even a moment, I would crumble. Around midnight, a doctor called me into a private consultation room. Michael was out of immediate danger, but his condition was far from simple. Initial results showed a significant electrolyte imbalance, with some indicators abnormally skewed, not consistent with simple fatigue or a missed dose of medication. The doctor didn't jump to conclusions, but he said something that made my blood run cold. "We need to clarify whether the patient has taken any additional drugs or supplements not on his prescription." I looked him straight in the eye. "The vial of pills I gave you." He nodded. "It has been temporarily sealed. The hospital will have it tested according to procedure. For now, what's important is that you remember exactly what the patient took today, at what time, and who witnessed it." I immediately pulled the small notebook from my purse. I had been recording every hour, every dose, every note, for weeks. The doctor looked at it for a long time, then looked up at me, his gaze different from before. "You've been very thorough." I gave a bitter smile, because I was afraid something might happen. He was silent for a few seconds, then just said, "Continue to keep everything very clear. At this stage, the clearer, the better." I knew what he meant. Back outside, Linda pulled me to a corner of the hallway. "Emily, tell me the truth. Do you suspect Michael?" I looked at her for a long time before replying, "I'm past suspecting." Linda was stunned. I told her, briefly and concisely, about Jessica. The money, the draft of the divorce settlement, the late-night phone call, the unlabeled vial of pills. I didn't give her all the evidence, just enough for her to understand this wasn't a jealous fit from a betrayed wife, but something that had gone too far. After listening, Linda's face turned white. "Is he insane?" I smiled, a smile devoid of any warmth. "Perhaps he has been for a long time. I just refused to believe it until now." My mother-in-law overheard snippets and insisted on knowing what was going on. Linda tried to placate her, saying, "Let's let the doctors save Michael first." She looked at me, her eyes welling with tears. "Emily, tell me the truth. Is there something going on between you two?" I looked at the wrinkled hand gripping mine, a complex feeling welling up inside me. It was a mix of compassion and bitterness. "In the end," I just replied, "there is, Mom. But now is not the time." Around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was David. I walked to the end of the hallway to take the call. His voice was brief. There's something you need to know immediately. Tonight, after Michael was admitted, Jessica left her apartment in Midtown West in a hurry. She took 2 small suitcases and went to an acquaintance's house in the Bronx. She seemed very panicked. I gripped the phone. Anything else? Yes. This afternoon, before the incident, she visited another pharmacy and met with a man whose name was previously on one of the intermediary money transfers. I closed my eyes. Keep a record of all of it for me. I have. After hanging up, I stood by the window at the end of the hallway for a long time. In the hospital courtyard below, the yellow lights cast long, cold shadows. Ambulances continued to come and go. The dry, rattling sound of stretcher wheels on the pavement echoed in the air. In the midst of it all, I felt like another layer of my life had just been torn away. Jessica's panic meant she knew this was out of their control. It meant that vial of pills was not harmless. It meant they had truly crossed the line. The next morning, Michael regained consciousness. The doctor allowed one family member to visit for a few minutes. My mother-in-law started crying the moment she saw him, but the doctor reminded her not to agitate the patient, so in the end, I was the one who went in. Michael lay on the monitoring bed, his face pale, his lips dry, his eyes sunken. Looking at him then, I still felt a pang of pain. No matter how much I hated him, he was once the man I loved enough to sell everything to save. He looked at me for a long time, then rasped, "What did you tell the doctors?" I stood a safe distance from the bed, not as close as before. What needed to be said? Michael closed his eyes, exhaling heavily. I just took the wrong thing. I let out a very soft laugh. If you just took the wrong thing, why did Jessica have to panic and pack her bags to leave her apartment in the middle of the night? Michael's eyes flew open. That one reaction was another confession, one without words. He stared at me, fear clearly visible in his eyes for the first time. You had me followed. I replied very slowly. You're wrong. I didn't have you followed. You and she did so many things that you left a trail everywhere you went. Michael's jaw tightened. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating what to say to get out of this, who to blame, how much I knew. After a moment, he lowered his voice. Emily, the thing between me and Jessica, I'll explain. But about the medication yesterday, don't jump to conclusions. And don't make it a big deal. I just got through a crisis. I can't handle any more pressure. I stood there, looking at the man on the hospital bed. Even at this point, he was still trying to use his illness as a shield. I gave a very slight nod. Fine, get some rest. I turned and walked to the door. Just as my hand touched the knob, I heard him call out sharply, Emily! I didn't turn back. Michael's voice trembled. What are you planning to do? I opened the door, my voice so calm it sounded strange even to me. I'm planning to do what I should have done the moment I saw the draft of the divorce settlement on your phone. The door closed behind me. Stepping out, I knew one thing for sure. Michael was starting to get scared. And once the person who always held the upper hand starts to get scared, it means the tables have turned. The very next morning, I went with Olivia to her law firm. We spent nearly 3 hours reviewing the entire case file one last time. Evidence of the affair, bank statements of the money transfers, the divorce settlement draft Michael had prepared, photos of Michael and Jessica meeting, David's reports, my medication logs, the hospital's receipt for the unlabeled vial. Everything was printed, categorized, and arranged into neat stacks. Olivia looked at me for a long time before pushing the draft of the divorce petition towards me. Emily, I'm asking you one last time. Are you sure? I picked up the pen, not answering right away. A flood of images flashed through my mind. The day Michael and I got married at a small venue in Brooklyn. The day he held Leo in the delivery room, his eyes red but smiling like a child. The times we argued about work and then made up over dinner. Those years were real. The love I had for him was also real. The only thing is, that reality was choked to death by him the moment he chose betrayal, chose money, chose deceit, and pushed me and our son into a corner. I signed my name. The stroke was firm, without a tremor, without hesitation. Olivia let out a soft breath. All right. From now on, we are no longer on the defensive. We agreed to file for divorce and simultaneously prepare a petition for an emergency temporary restraining order on the assets that showed signs of being diverted. Olivia also contacted a colleague in finance to help further analyze the loan and the flow of money that Michael had transferred. Everything started moving along a clear, cold legal path, with no room for sentiment. Leaving the law firm, I didn't go straight home. I went to pick up Leo from school earlier than usual. Watching my son sitting in the back seat, his legs dangling, chattering about being praised by his teacher, I had to bite my lip to keep my heart from softening. It wasn't his fault. He was still just a child who believed his parents were the most reliable foundation in the world. And for that reason, I could not lose. That afternoon, when I got back to the hospital, Linda was waiting for me outside the room. Her eyes were red, her expression a mixture of anger and helplessness. Jessica was just here. I stopped in my tracks. She still dares to come? Linda gritted her teeth. I stopped her outside. She was crying, saying she just wanted to see Michael for a minute, saying she was the one who truly cared for him. Mom was so distraught, she almost fell for it. Hearing that, I could only laugh, a bitter, acrid laugh. That woman really knew how to pick her moments to play the victim. I walked straight to the end of the hallway. Jessica was still standing there, her hair neat, but her eyes red and her face visibly pale. The moment she saw me, she froze, then immediately adopted a soft, gentle tone. Emily, I just want to see Michael for a moment. I stood about an arm's length away from her, looking straight at her. To visit him, or to see how badly your plan failed. Jessica's face turned white. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I laughed. Stop acting. At this point, do you really think I'm going to fall for that innocent act? She clutched her purse, her lips trembling slightly. Michael and I were in touch. That's true. But what happened the other day was an accident. I don't know anything about it. I took a step closer, close enough to see the panic in her eyes. I haven't even told you what I have, and you're already so quick to deny everything. Don't you see how foolish you look? Jessica stiffened. I continued, my voice low but ice cold. The money you received, the place you live, the people you meet, the medication you bought, I know everything. If you want to drag this out further, go ahead and try. But remember one thing, from now on, for every step you take towards my husband, I will turn that step into evidence. Jessica looked at me, and for the first time, her sweet, fake demeanor was gone. Her eyes were filled only with resentment. You think you've won? I smiled. I haven't won yet, but at least I'm not a fool anymore. She turned and walked away quickly, the sharp clicks of her high heels echoing down the hallway. I watched until her figure disappeared, then returned to the hospital room. Michael was sitting up against the pillows, his complexion still poor but his eyes clearer than the day before. When he saw me enter, he immediately looked towards the door, as if to see if Jessica had gotten in. I pulled a chair over and sat down. She just left. Michael was silent. I took a file folder from my purse and placed it on the bedside table. Sign this. Michael frowned. What is it? The divorce papers. I said it very softly, as if I were reminding him to take his medicine. Michael was stunned for a few seconds, then let out a broken laugh. Are you insane? You're asking for a divorce at a time like this? I looked at him without blinking. You're the one who wrote the draft. I'm just signing the real thing. Michael's face changed color. He stared at me, his voice hoarse. Emily, listen to me. It's not what you think. I cut him off. Then what is it? Did Jessica invent the $40,000 transfer? Did the divorce settlement draft just appear on your phone by itself? Did the unlabeled vial of pills grow legs and walk into your drawer? Or did you accidentally tell her that you had to let me sell the last apartment myself and offer it up so it's clean? Michael's mouth opened, but no words came out. I knew I had hit his weakest point. He started breathing heavily, his chest heaving. I sat perfectly still, making no move to comfort him as I would have before. Michael, listen carefully. From now on, your explanations are worthless. What I need is your signature. Michael looked at me for a long time. In his eyes, there was fear, there was anger, and there was even a hint of belated pleading. Are you really trying to push me to my death? I smiled, but my eyes didn't. The one who almost pushed me to my death was you. I'm just pulling myself out of it. Outside the door, Linda stood frozen. My mother-in-law had also arrived at some point, her hands clenched together, tears streaming down her face. But this time, no one spoke up to intervene. Perhaps by then, everyone understood that this marriage was beyond saving. I stood up and pushed the folder closer to Michael's hand. You can keep it. My lawyer will be in touch with you. If you want to keep any shred of dignity for yourself, don't let this get to the ugliest point. I turned and walked away. As I reached the door, I heard the sound of Michael's hand slamming against the bed frame and his voice breaking behind me. Emily! I didn't turn back, because I knew that if I looked back one more time, I might remember the man from the years gone by, and I couldn't afford to be weak anymore. After the day I left the divorce papers on his hospital table, things moved faster than I expected. Perhaps it was because Michael, more than anyone, understood that when I chose to involve lawyers, it meant I had no intention of turning back. Or perhaps it was because he knew that what I had in my hands was enough to push things to a place he could no longer hide. Olivia worked with Michael's lawyer on my behalf. At first, he tried to stall, to speak with me privately, to explain, to negotiate, in a way that would save face for both of us. But I refused everything. I had nothing left to say to a man who had turned my kindness into an excuse to drain our assets, and then tried to frame me for harming him. The test results for the unlabeled vial finally came back. The hospital, not wanting to overstep law enforcement, didn't offer a final conclusion but confirmed that it contained ingredients not listed in Michael's prescription and were absolutely unsuitable for self-administration by a heart transplant recipient. That alone was enough for Olivia to tighten our case even further. The rest was left to the legal process and the proper authorities. My only job was to stay calm and keep my own actions clean. Jessica no longer appeared at the hospital. David informed me that she had cleared out her apartment in Midtown West and was trying to lay low for a while. But hiding couldn't make the financial trail disappear. Money transferred was money transferred. Meetings that happened had happened. The pharmacy purchases, the intermediary transactions, the secret rendezvous when pieced together, they formed a picture so clear it was undeniable. Michael signed the divorce papers 3 days later. He signed them in his hospital room, in front of both lawyers and Linda. My mother-in-law sat in the hallway, crying inconsolably. I stood there and watched his pen move, a shaky line across the paper, and felt no emotion stir within me. Perhaps after so many sleepless nights, after swallowing so much pain, I was finally and truly empty. The price of this divorce was steep. Michael had to concede full custody of Leo to me. After all, assets were accounted for, traced, and settled. I managed to keep the last apartment and enough money for my son and me to start over. The old company was practically unsalvageable. I didn't regret it. A business built on the sweat of two people, only to become a tool for one to gut the other, was destined to fall. Michael remained in the hospital for nearly another month. After the incident, his health declined rapidly. The doctors said his body was weaker than anticipated. His mental state was unstable, and his recovery would be very long. I fulfilled my final responsibilities, signing necessary papers, paying outstanding bills, and coordinating with the doctors when needed. But I no longer sat by his bedside as I once had. Between us, all that was left was the minimum duty one human has for another who has passed through their life, not the bond of husband and wife. The day I moved out of the house in Brooklyn, a light rain was falling over New York. I packed Leo's clothes myself, boxed up a few essential items, and left behind so many things I once thought I couldn't live without. The dining table, the curtains, the potted plant on the balcony, the matching mugs in the kitchen, they all stayed. I stood in the middle of the empty living room for a long time before pulling my suitcase away. Leo tugged at my hand and asked, "Mommy, where are we going?" I stroked his hair and smiled. "We're going to our new home. A home with just the two of us. But it will be peaceful." He looked up at me and hugged my leg tightly. "As long as I have you." Just those few words were enough to make me turn away to hide my tears. The new apartment wasn't large, but it was bright. The window looked out onto a green space. In the morning, there were birds singing. In the afternoon, sunlight streamed in. I bought Leo a small desk, repapered a few corners of the walls myself, put up new curtains, and placed a snake plant on the balcony. The first few days were tough. I was juggling pending legal paperwork, looking for a job, caring for my son, and learning to live without another adult in the house to share the burden. But strangely, the busier I became, the more alive I felt. I took a remote accounting job for a company I knew, then took on a few freelance projects. The money wasn't as much as before, but it was clean. Every dollar I earned made me feel like I was standing taller. Leo gradually got used to our new life. He didn't ask about his dad as much anymore. Perhaps children sense things adults don't say out loud. He just became more attached to me, more well-behaved, and every night he would curl up in my arms and whisper, "Don't be sad anymore, Mommy." I would always hug him tight and reply, "I'm not sad anymore," and it was true. I was no longer sad in the way of someone who has been left behind. I only felt regret for a period of my life where I had placed too much trust in the wrong person. But regret doesn't mean wanting to go back. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed forever. One late autumn afternoon, I took Leo to the park. He ran ahead, his laughter echoing in the sunlight. I sat on a bench, watching him, and suddenly felt a strange lightness in my heart. The wind blew through my hair, over my shoulders, and through all the past years that I thought would crush me. I realized I had truly walked out of it. Not unscathed, but covered in scars, yet I had still walked out. And that was enough.